Listen, grease monkey. If you ever touch a real stick, I'll personally call the medics. Brutal laughter exploded across the scorching Nevada flight line, mixing with the thunderous roar of jet engines. Staff Sergeant Sofia Rivera, the smallest warrior on Thunderbolt Air Base, lay half-buried beneath an F-16 Fighting Falcon. Oil streaked her sleeves. Sweat poured down her face. Her wrench kept turning as vicious insults rained down. Hangar rat, dream pilot only fit to polish cockpits. They didn't know the next voice cleared from the tower would be hers. Eagle-7, you're cleared to land. And when it came, it would save a life and obliterate every unspoken rule. Quick pause before we continue. Tell us, where in the world are you watching from? If you're enjoying these stories, make sure to hit subscribe, because what happened next would shatter every assumption about who belongs in the cockpit. The merciless sun baked the Nevada tarmac into a shimmering hellscape. Heat rose in visible waves, distorting the F-16s lined up for the afternoon cycle. The flight line reeked of superheated metal and jet fuel, a toxic cocktail that clung to everything. A loose semicircle of pilots lounged in the hangar's shade. Captain Rodriguez, tall and perpetually smug, tapped his soda can against his thigh. "All right, gentlemen, bets on the table. A month's pay says Rivera will never hear a call sign on tower comms. Not unless it's to fetch coffee for whoever's actually flying." The hollow chuckles that followed were a verdict. No one stepped forward to argue. Under Fighting Falcon 415's fuselage, Sofia kept her head down, forearms flexing with steady torque. At 27, barely 5 feet 2 inches tall, she disappeared in the airframe shadow. Grease streaked her hands, scars telling stories written in tools and unforgiving metal. She listened without a word, jaw tightening once before her work resumed. This was her territory. She didn't need to win arguments. She needed to keep these machines alive. The precise crunch of high-polish Oxfords on gravel drew her attention. Colonel Morrison appeared like a shadow cutting across the tarmac. Early 50s, uniform pressed sharp enough to draw blood. He scanned the flight line with an expression that valued little beyond his brutal standards. Sofia slid out on her creeper, rising to attention. Sweat tracked her temple, but her eyes stayed locked on his. "And you are?" His tone was flat, like reading an inventory tag. "Staff Sergeant Rivera, Colonel." Morrison let silence hang too long. "Why is someone like you working on critical systems for an F-16? This isn't a motorcycle repair bay." "I'm a lead technician on this airframe, sir, running a post-flight check on the flap actuator system." Morrison stepped closer, eyes finding a black, leather-bound book in her toolbox. He plucked it free, flipping the cover. "A diary?" "My civilian flight logbook, sir." He leafed through pages showing early morning flights, doubled shifts to pay for lessons, inked hours tracing her climb towards certification. He snapped it shut. "Mechanics have no business pretending to be pilots. This stays with me." He tucked it under his arm like a captured flag. "Now get back to your work." The sabotage began immediately. Tools disappeared from her kit, only to surface hours later behind equipment. Maintenance reports she'd filed vanished. Someone poured grit into her water bottle. Small acts carrying the same message: "You don't belong here." By the second week, she'd become a cautionary tale. New airmen glanced at her with wariness, like she was a monument to unspoken base policy. She ate alone, worked alone, walked the perimeter fence at night, while the F-16s gleamed under floodlights in the distance. The morning light had a hard edge as Sofia watched the main flight line from Hangar 6. A sharp sound caught her attention. The metallic snap of a pre-flight checklist being flipped too fast. A young pilot was moving along Fighting Falcon 415, rushing through his inspection sequence. Her gaze narrowed when he reached the wing root. The flap actuator sat partially exposed after maintenance. She watched him test it with one hand, too abrupt, too heavy. The faint metallic clack carried across the tarmac to her. She knew that sound. It was the noise a fatigue part made when stressed past tolerance. A sound that didn't belong in a healthy actuator. Her cleaning rag dropped to the ground. She was already striding toward the F-16 line. "Captain," she said, voice low but firm. "Hold up. I need to take another look at that actuator. I think there's a fault." He looked down at her and frowned. "It's fine, Sergeant. I followed procedure. I heard the actuator pop under load. That's not normal." His jaw tightened. "With respect, Sergeant, you're not cleared to re-inspect my bird. I've got a launch window. If that part fails mid-flight, you won't get to worry about your launch window. What's going on here? Colonel Morrison's shadow fell across them, tone already loaded. Nothing, sir, the pilot said quickly. Just about to taxi. Sir, I believe there's a defect in the flap actuator. I need clearance to... Morrison's hand came up, cutting her off. You have an assignment, Staff Sergeant. Return to your post. Now. From Hangar 6, she watched Fighting Falcon 415 taxi out. Sunlight flashed along its canopy as afterburners tore across the base, shaking dust from the rafters. That afternoon, the routine changed. A gap where a tower update should have been. Then the clipped voice of a controller. Eagle-7, repeat, confirm status. Sofia froze. Eagle-7 meant 415. The next transmission was garbled static. Only fragments emerged. Flap control, negative response, primary comms. She crossed to the hangar door. Far over the desert, a speck moved in jerky, uneven lines. Above 18,000 feet, Captain Martinez was wrestling with a machine that no longer obeyed. The decision wasn't a choice, it was instinct. She slung her toolkit over her shoulder and ran toward the control tower. Using her master keys, she slipped through the maintenance corridor into the communications room dominated by racks of electronics. One glance told her the problem. The backup communications array was drawing unstable power, status lights flickering like a dying heartbeat. A single black lead was mis-seated, copper shielding scorched where it had arced against the frame. She stripped away bundled cabling, fished fresh cable from her kit. Kill power to the backup module, she told nearby tech. That'll drop the last comm link to Eagle-7. It's already useless. Give me 30 seconds. When power restored, the module spun up with a low whine. The hiss of dead air shifted, now carrying a human voice. Tower, this is Eagle-7. Fuel critical, approach unstable. She closed her kit and headed for the tower cabin. The glass-walled cabin erupted as she emerged. Morrison was at the central station, eyes locked on the radar display, tracking Eagle-7's erratic path. Staff Sergeant Rivera, you're out of line. She didn't break stride. I reconnected your backup channel. You got partial comms. You were not authorized to. You want him down alive or not? The room went still. Morrison's mouth tightened, but he didn't stop her as she reached for the spare headset. Eagle-7, this is Thunderbolt Tower. I have you on partial. Do you copy? Martinez's voice came through ragged but intact. Tower, read you barely. Controls compromised. Fuel low. I'm Staff Sergeant Rivera. I've worked on your bird. You've got a flap actuator failure. Primary hydraulics are dead. I'm going to walk you through the manual override. She guided him step by step. Red, lever marked auxiliary flap release. Two-stage release, push forward and hold 3 seconds. Now bring your speed down in increments. A wind shear warning flashed. Eagle-7, abort primary. We're taking you to secondary runway. You'll catch the arrestor cable. The F-16 came in fast, nose high, engine straining. At the last 100 meters, Martinez dropped the tail hook. It snagged the cable with a whip-crack sound, the jet shuddering violently as momentum bled out in seconds. Tower, Eagle-7 down safe. The tower erupted in applause. Sofia lowered the headset, turned, and walked toward the stairwell without a word. In the official debrief, Martinez stood before the assembled personnel. Eagle-7 went up for training. Midway through, I lost primary flap control and comms. I was running out of fuel and options. Then someone came on the channel, Staff Sergeant Sofia Rivera. She knew my aircraft systems well enough to guide me through a manual override I'd never used. I'm standing here because of it. He paused. I've put in a formal recommendation for the Air Force Commendation Medal for Sergeant Rivera and for her immediate entry into officer training. That evening, Morrison appeared at Sofia's quarters with her logbook. Staff Sergeant, I was wrong. My judgment was flawed. You'll report to the training office at 0800. The training field was functional to the point of brutality. Scorched asphalt strips, skeletal control tower, rattling prefab classrooms. Sofia stood in a fresh flight suit, logbook clipped to her board. The first drill, takeoff and pattern flight in the T-38, return for precision landing. Halfway through the final turn, the instructor threw a curveball. Engine failure, respond. She didn't hesitate. Throttle back, rudder compensate, trim adjustment. The eased, frame steadied. Land in 800 feet. She brought the nose down, touched firm but centered, rolled to a stop with 100 feet to spare. By the third week, team drills began. 4 aircraft formations, live-fire runs. When lead took a simulated hit, Sofia rolled into position without waiting for orders, lined up the target, fired within the window. The final evaluation, a modified test platform with unfamiliar controls. Halfway through her flight, systems flagged an intermittent actuator signal loss. She ran diagnostics, isolated the fluctuation, adjusted inputs manually. By landing, the glitch had stabilized. Staff Sergeant Sofia Rivera, welcome to the Officer Corps. Morrison slid the insignia box across the table, meeting her eyes with a respectful nod. The ceremony was brief. On the flight line with an F-35 climbing overhead, Martinez pinned new bars to her collar. Lieutenant, you've got lead next month in the joint exercise. Don't make me regret it. She allowed herself the smallest smile. Wouldn't dream of it, Captain. That night, she walked to the runway's far end, where sodium lights faded into darkness. Stars hung low over the desert. She thought of that first day, the weight of stairs, the small cuts meant to push her out. Every flight, every drill, every choice had been a brick in the path that brought her here. Tomorrow that path would continue, out beyond the runway's edge into the sky, where nothing stayed still and nothing was given. The wind carried the distant rumble of another night's sortie launching. She closed her eyes, letting the sound fill her chest. Then she turned back toward the hangars. There was work to do, always. The desert night had fallen silent. In the hangars, lights dimmed to amber as mechanics worked in practiced motions. Sofia stood at the tarmac's edge, her new officer bars catching the light. Not with decoration shine, but with the weight of something earned in silence. She learned to keep focus where it mattered. On checklists, coordinates, aircraft responding exactly as asked. She didn't fight storms head-on. She flew through them, adjusting trim and pitch until turbulence became just another condition to manage. Now lead was more than a role in a sortie. It was proof that quiet persistence could write its own clearance into the sky. So when we tell stories like Sofia's, it's not just to honor what she's done. It's to remind ourselves that every runway is built by people who refuse to turn back, even when the lights go out. Maybe you've been there. Maybe you're there now, standing at the edge of your own field, hearing the world doubt you. If so, take a moment to see what Sofia saw. You don't have to shout to be heard. You just have to keep moving. One check, one climb, one landing at a time. Don't forget subscribe to She-Force Tales.